My goal is to get through the PowerPoint as quickly as I can, and that means in about an hour. And then we are just going to leave the last 30 minutes to talk. So that's kind of how we're going to go through this. Now, I do have a PowerPoint that will be available to you after this meeting. So just know that everything you see or hear me say, you will receive. On slide number 2, there's a giant disclaimer in red, and it basically says, listen, I am a presenter. I'm not an attorney or an accountant. So anything that I say does not constitute legal advice or financial advice. And you are highly, highly encouraged to seek a legal professional and a licensed professional for these purposes of discussing establishing a business and most importantly, tax decisions, because as you will come to find out, that's very, very important. So at the bottom of every slide, you'll actually see that it's in the footer, it says see disclaimer slide 2. That's what this guy is. So anyway, guys, we're just really here to chat tonight. And I really hope that you walk away with a really functional outcome for considering starting your business, or if you are going to be a contractor and be hired by another business and things like that. So what are we going to do? So talk a little bit
Hold
about.
on just a second, Kevin. We do need to give the opening code. I don't
Oh,
mean to
yeah,
cut
go
you
ahead.
off. Yeah, so let's do blue as our opening code. Okay.
All right.
So
Here we go.
thanks.
So blue. All right. So we're going to talk very, very briefly about who we are, why and why not to consider establishing a private practice. There's a slide that I call Hanging Your Shield. We're going to review the types of private practice. I'm going to walk you through step by step about forming an LLC, most specifically. Then we're going to get into probably why most people want to be here and hear about writing an agreement. Some people might call it a contract. We'll talk about the different categories, the scope of service, compensation rates, compensation and rates, talking about terminating agreements, discussing liability, indemnification and insurance, student roster, and then a couple takeaways. So that's where we're headed through this evening. So I am not going to necessarily read every single thing on every slide for you guys because I really want to get to that discussion. So really quickly, on this slide, there is just a word cloud of all the different things that we do, right? Mobility and Braille and expanded core and advocacy and evaluations. And Justin went through, and I didn't realize he was going to give such a long bio. But I just listed there some different things that I have done through my LLC, noting that I started it back in 2005. So it's like a 20-year reunion almost. So anyway, my full-time job is in a school district, and my wife and I elected to homeschool our kids. And as a result of that, I needed to find extra work. And the best way to do that was to become a contractor. And so I just wanted to mention being an adjunct professor, doing conference presentations. Uh, all of these things fall under the guise of how you can get paid to make extra money. And then we're going to talk about what that looks like. So, again, this is just a quick snapshot of all the different things that I do. Now, as I know some people, I'm going to be polarizing tonight. I guarantee. I know there's a few people who are like, why do you have vision impairment specialist up at the top of your screen? Well, it's a great umbrella term, right? So I don't want to get too political with all kinds of stuff tonight, but I do prefer the term vision impairment specialist when I refer to all these people listed. So what I have listed there is all of the different professionals and practitioners who may be considering a private practice. That includes the CADIS, the NCATB, COMS, and OMC, TVI or TSVI, depending on what part of the country you're from. And so all of these folks have that opportunity. Now, also notice that all of them are credentialed, meaning there is a certifying or license body. TVI, TSVI, is going to come through the Department of Education within each individual state, but otherwise, then it's going to go through one of the national or international certification bodies. And why does that matter? Because certification matters, right? It is the gold standard. I always tell people, why would you go to, a dentist if they're not board certified? Well, why would you want to be working with an AT specialist that isn't board certified? So it's very important. And also when we talk about the business structure. So now, why should we start a private practice? Well, it gives us a lot of autonomy. It provides flexibility. Most importantly, most of us are looking for additional potential income. Some of us can't say no. That's me. One of the reasons why I agreed to do this presentation is I'm just, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about our field. And I want our profession to grow and I want our profession to serve all kids and all adults, urban, rural, suburban, and private contracting is really where we're going with that. There is a growing demand, as we all know. There is sustainability with our private practice. There's a lot of work that's out there, especially if you're willing to travel. Being in private practice, as I need to shut off my phone, being in private practice also provides a change of pace, right? I call it burnout recovery. A lot of us were in jobs that, we really had a grind for a number of years, and it gives you to do something a little bit different. You can pick where you want to work and when you want to work. So it's good for that. It's excellent to supplement your retirement. It's also a way to contribute to the field, and we'll talk about interns and practicum students in a little while. And finally, that is that mentorship piece. It's a grand opportunity for you to run a business and then hire people under you and for you to train them up in the way they need to go for the rest of their professional career. So it offers great opportunities for mentorship and training. So that's why you may start a private practice. So let's talk about why you should not start a private practice. Now, again, this is just a Kevin thing. I don't necessarily know if it's, like I said, I'm not providing legal advice, but this is from my perspective. And the biggest one is you are the business, you are your brand. So I am wearing a branded shirt with my logo on it. And I am responsible for everything in that business. I am responsible for my notes, my mileage, my data, my evaluations, my background checks, all of my agreements or contracts. I will pretty much refer to contracts as agreements for the rest of the night. I should have given you that caveat. Why not to start? There's no guaranteed paycheck. You could have a great setup working with a handful of kids, and you have a couple of high minute students move out or adults move out, and all of a sudden you are not with consistent cash flow. So that is one reason why you need to consider about establishing your private practice, especially if you're doing it full time. There can be a level of professional isolation. I've been super blessed to work with some really, really incredible people. My school district is atypical. My district is a rural district outside of St. Louis, but we have just over 50 students, 4 full-time TVIs, and a comms. And so I love being able to collaborate with my colleagues. And when you go out on your own, you don't necessarily have that. You may feel the disconnect from people in a building. At an agency, if you're going into people's homes, you may feel like the only people that you see are your clients. So there can be a little bit of that isolation feel to it. There is the potential for full liability exposure. I will talk a lot about the importance of insurance and what liability means, but you do increase your risk for that. There are compliance requirements. The law is the law. You have to stay up on it. And sometimes it's to our advantage, especially when the mileage rate changes. It's good to know that because you're going to pay yourself more money. There can be a potential conflict with work-life boundaries, right? So I find that I work a lot more on my private practice than I do my full-time job. Part of that is because I'm working a full-time job during the day. And so you need to make sure that that is a consideration, especially if you're going to be providing services across the home, the school, and the community with adults in the evenings after work. If you have night lessons for orientation mobility, those are all work-life balance boundaries and balances that you have to have. And finally, there are some startup costs and monthly expenses, and you have taxes and estimated tax payments. And you do have to be ready for payment to come late, sometimes 60 days, 90 days. If you're really depending on a $4,000 and $5,000 check every month, and the secretary was out sick and it doesn't make it to the board meeting to get approved, you have to wait an entire month to get that paycheck. So again, there is a little bit of that financial consideration as well. Okay, So let's talk about hanging your shield, right? What are the types of private practice? Now, on the screen, I have a whole list of all the different types of private practice. Because I don't know all of you, I know some of you, I'm looking at a few names on the screen, but I put a couple of asterisks next to the ones that in our profession, I think I run into and talk with people the most. And that would be a sole proprietorship, an LLC, which is a limited liability company, an S corporation, as well as independent contractor. So there's other things up there for being a nonprofit, being a single member LLC, and having a general partnership. So those are all listed, but those four are pretty much the ones that will probably relate most to what this presentation is about. Now, I do want to say that this is where consulting with a lawyer and accountant becomes very important to you, to know what kind of business. Now, with the internet and AI and things like that, you can put a whole bunch of info about yourself and say, what should I look at and go after? And it's probably going to help you. But just know that you are, again, you are the brand and you are in charge. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about the structure of a couple of these. And again, I have a statement here. It says, I'm not telling you what to do. That's your accountant's job. They will advise you based on your current financial situation of what makes the most sense. So, a sole proprietor, you are a single person. You are the business, like an owner operator kind of a thing. It's very simple. It's very cheap to start. And then there's no legal separation between you and the business. So you are putting your personal assets at risk. That means your home, your car, everything that you own, the shirt on your back. So if you go into sole proprietor, you are taking on a level of risk that you need to be aware of. And depending on what profession you're in, especially if you're doing a lot of cooking lessons with folks or you're an orientation mobility specialist, if you're in a job that is putting your clients and your students at a high level of risk and you're trying to monitor their safety, that is a consideration for you. The next one would be a single member LLC. So again, that's one person. It legally separates you from the business. It will protect your personal assets and your debts. So basically, the way to think of this is now the company owns all of your stuff. So I have a monitor here, a desk, a task light, my computer. All that is owned by my company. It's not owned by Kevin, but it's owned by Hollinger Consulting. So if I was ever sued, they could come and grab, my computer and come after my monitor, but they can't go after my 55-inch TV that's sitting to my left, or the home that I'm sitting in. So that is where the power of an LLC can come in for some people. And similarly, that's an S corporation. So an S corporation is what we call a pass through. And what that basically means is the business's profits and monies pass through and pass on to you as a person, and it is still one tax bill. But a caveat is you have to pay yourself what we call a reasonable salary. Now, I ask my accountant all the time, like, what's reasonable? And we always joke around that my accountant, which is my wife, is always joking around about increasing my salary or decreasing it based on my performance. So it's kind of fun when you involve your family to help you out. But again, this is where your tax accountant will really help you understand what are your personal assets, how much stuff are you going to have. S corporation just gets a little bit bigger. In general, if you Google that, it'll tell you if you are going to be profiting, 60, 80, $100,000 in terms of profit, what you net and take home after all of your expenses, then you may want to look at something more like an S corporation. And then finally, there's independent contractor. So the idea here is that you are working for somebody else. So in my business, I'm going to be hiring my son. Ironically enough, he is finishing his program and graduates from the University of Kentucky this weekend, and he's at Leader Dogs doing his internship. So I'm going to hire him as an employee. Now, if he had his own business, I could hire him as an independent contractor. I could also hire just a person, not to be a full-time employee, but as an independent contractor. So that would necessitate me offering an agreement or a contract. You are not considered an employee. And as an independent contractor, your personal assets are at risk unless you have your own LLC or a corporation that is being hired. So again, this can be like layers of an onion, where you can start peeling them back. But ultimately, if you go to work for somebody else, as an independent contractor, you still have a level of personal risk unless that, you need to negotiate with the company you're going to work with about what types of insurance and things do they offer, or are you responsible to get those things. So okay, and also if you guys have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I was told somebody's going to be keeping an eye on that, and then we will definitely get to them. So systematically, hopefully we can keep moving through this. So like I said, I want to go kind of quick. So let's talk about forming an LLC. Now, if you're going to do a sole proprietor or you're just an independent contractor, the process will look a little bit different. But the reason I chose to discuss about an LLC is because if you're going to be doing a lot of work, even upwards of 20 and 25 hours a week, and if you're, being paid anywhere from $125 to $200 an hour, you're going to make some money. And most of the time, you might move into the realm of an LLC. And people get really intimidated by it, guys, but it's really not too hard. So, first and foremost, choose a business name, right? You have to confirm that your business name is available. And you do that by going to your state's website and you punch in all the names. So, we recently purchased a farm and I came up with all these names, and lo and behold, like 6 out of the 10 of them were already taken. And so you got to choose a business name. I'd like to mention some people like to get really creative with their names, which is good. But if you get too creative, it doesn't necessarily identify you with what you do and who you are. So that's just a little bit of, word of wisdom, so to speak. I know somebody, the business name was Have Cane Will Travel. I thought that was a great business name. He was an O&M specialist, and I thought it reflected, what he did and who he was. Then what you have to do is you have to go as you register yourself, you have to say who is the responsible party, who is the person that will receive and be in charge of all of the legal documents. So if I am the owner of an LLC and I am the only employee, I become the registered agent. So remember when I said you are your brand and you are responsible for everything? You are the registered agent, and that is why. Well, after you do that, you will write your articles of organization, and that is a form through your state's Secretary of State. And this stuff isn't super complex, guys. A lot of people feel like, do I need to go and get a lawyer? Yeah, they'd love to do it for you because you're going to pay them some money. The nice peace of mind there is that it will be defensible and it will be up to date and current. Do be careful of what you get from and read from the internet and AI. They're wrong sometimes. But you can get a lot of that done ahead of time and send it to them and say, this is what I have. Can you proof it? And it will save you hours of their work developing this for you. So after you file your article of organization, then you create an operating agreement. This is basically your internal document that says, okay, what am I going to do? Why am I forming this business and what I'm going to offer? Okay, so this is kind of where you list out, hey, I'm going to provide instruction, consultation, evaluation. I'm going to do some training, maybe, look to be an adjunct professor at some time. This is where you outline all that stuff. You then have to go and obtain an EIN from the IRS, and it's basically like a social security number for your business. That's how you file your taxes. So again, it's very simple. You go online, fill out a form. It gets you a number, and then you need that number to do number 6, and that's go open a bank account. And I wrote bring 3, 4, and 5 with you. So that means bring your articles, your operating agreement, and your EIN. That's all you need to open a bank account. You don't even have to put any money in there to start with. Some banks, will allow you to do it. I walked in with $100, and that was sufficient to start. After that point, you need to obtain any required licenses and permits. Now, you will see a little bit later that different states pay a lot differently, and there are some states that do not allow LLCs. And there are some states where LLCs are very, very expensive and they require a lot of ongoing paperwork. So, for example, Tennessee does not have LLCs, but New Jersey is a very expensive place to establish an LLC. You can establish it anywhere you want, but ultimately, the state where you live is probably where you're going to do it. The next step is to determine how you're going to keep your books. Is it going to be you and paper and Excel? Are you going to have software? Are you going to hire a bookkeeper? Are you going to get a remote support administrative assistant from someplace? So you got to make all those decisions for yourself. Then the next step is securing your insurance. Now, I'm assuming that most people on this call have insurance unless you're working full time for an employer that then probably offers you the insurance you need. But as a private contractor, we will talk about general liability, professional liability, workman's comp, and then what do you do about driving and transporting clients, especially if you're in O&M or if you are working as a VRT in someone's home and they want to go to a grocery store and shop and do all those kinds of things. So it's super important that you secure all that insurance way before you start working with anybody. Because if an event happens before that insurance is in place, I'm told it's no good. So you need to make sure to have your insurance in place before you start. Then you begin drafting or obtaining agreement templates. So, there's quite a few people on this call. Some of you guys may own a business, and a lot of times people will call and be like, hey, how do you do this? What do you write? And I'm going to share almost this entire presentation comes straight from my agreement. So I encourage you to create an agreement template. And then last but not least within this process is make sure you stay in compliance. Make sure you have everything ready to go before you've got your shield hung and before you open for business, just make sure you're ready to go. Cross your T's, dot your I's, and then off we go. So let's talk about writing the agreement. Now, this is where a lot of people, I think, are going to start leaning into the screen a little bit more. What I have in front of you is a slide that is a list, and I'm just going to run through the list that is there in case there's anybody that has a visual impairment or a print disability and isn't able to see it, because I'm not going to name all of them, but I'm going to give you the main category. And then we are going to dive into all of the ones that have a double asterisk. And so the rest of the slides, it'll be very, very transparent. It's not to say these other areas aren't important. It's just I only have an hour. So that's the way I'm going to go about it. So first and foremost, you need to have an effective date and a term, right? When does it start? When does it end? And you need to have renewal language. So I've had some agreements written that says this agreement is good for 3 years. That's perfectly acceptable. If they want to sign a 3-year agreement, great. But that also means you just didn't give yourself a raise the next 2 years, right? So you got to make sure you have an effective date and a term. Then there is the scope of services. That's what are you going to bill them for? Okay. Well, we're going to talk a ton about that. Roles and responsibilities. That means what is the district or agency or client, private person? What are their duties versus contractor duties? Now, I'm going to talk pretty much district because I think that's where the most private contractual work is nowadays. There is some with, voc rehab and state agencies, but for the purpose of the presentation, district is just going to be for school districts. Then you have to talk about your credentials and your qualifications. That is, what is your licensure and certification requirements? How do you represent yourself? So that is what we call an attestation. And then also, what are your warranties? Meaning, what is your ongoing commitment? So, for example, I basically say, I will maintain any credential that I need to do the job that I am agreeing with you for. So if I'm being hired by a district for AT instruction and consultation, I need to maintain my CADIS. I have some agreements where I do TVI, AT, and O&M, and I need to make sure that I maintain all three of them. So that's my job. The next thing is background checks and required training. That is what are required, who is responsible to pay for them, when do they have to be done. So those are very important things to outline. You need to have a statement about student confidentiality. So FERPA, right? None of us should be really worried about HIPAA because we're not doing third-party reimbursement stuff. But this is about governing law, IDEA, educational records, vocational rehab records. If you are working with a client that is receiving Medicaid funds, there is a requirement for that, and we'll talk about that. Next is compensation and rates. Oh boy, here we go. We will talk about that across a few slides. And obviously that is, what is your fee structure? What are you charging for and how are you going to do it? We're going to talk about the expenses and reimbursement, self-explanatory. How are you going to invoice and what are the payment terms? So this is what is required in your invoice. I've had some agreements that just say, give me the date, the client, and the units. That's it. Then I've had other agreements where they want 6 pieces of information on every single one. So they want like the date, the time range, the client who was the administrator or teacher that was on site, the billable units, and that kind of a thing. So just know that again, districts, agencies, folks are gonna talk with you about this. Invoicing payment terms. Then we're going to talk about termination. It's a scary word if you're on the receiving end, but it could also be a scary word if you have to terminate. So we'll talk about what does it mean to terminate for cause, non-payment, without cause. What about early termination fees? What if you're unable or an inability to perform your work? Then liability and indemnification. Who's responsible for what? And I want to make sure to talk about a liability cap. So if somebody can make sure to remind me to mention that, if I don't, I would appreciate it. What are the requirements for insurance? There's a couple slides on that. Independent contractor status. You need to talk in your agreement about governance and compliance. Basically, again, that you're attesting to whatever the state and federal laws are, that you have a non-discrimination policy within your operating agreement, those kinds of things. And then I have written here Exhibit A, student roster. Again, student client, it could be student client, but basically it has to be FERPA compliant. So you're protecting the identity of that individual. But it talks about service authorization and how to amend that roster of clients or students that you're going to work with. All right, here we go. Scope of practice. So this is my example. So HC LLC represents Hollinger Consulting. And basically, this is a snapshot of what mine looks like. And I just want to read it to you real quick to frame it, where it says HCLLC shall provide services. Now, note the word services is a capital S. When you write an agreement, when things are capitalized, that means that word is defined. And so on the next slide, I'm gonna show you what my services are, and that one word captures everything that I agreed to perform. So this is the stuff that really matters when you go to write an agreement with an agency, a person, a school district, right? Okay, so we're gonna provide services upon a written agreement during this term, consistent with the expanded core curriculum requirements of Missouri's Bright Act. Now, I have it stated there what the actual name of the Bright Act is. It's Missouri law that was passed in 2022. It's another presentation that would be awesome. And then I have 3 bullet points that the services outlined will meet the IEP or IFSP as defined in IDEA. The services outlined will meet a student's 504 plan created under the Rehab Act. It's listed there. And other services directed pursuant to written authorization from a district's director of special ed, a superintendent, or another representative. So what that means is I know I'm going to be working with kids on an IEP, IFSP, or a 504, but is there a chance that there could be something else? I don't know, but I put a statement in there just to cover myself to say that I will do it, but it has to be with written permission of a school district. So let me give you a good example of that. There may be an evaluation that you do on a student that is not visually impaired if you're an O&M because they are interested in travel training, right? So your business may include travel training for folks that do not have a visual impairment, but are not yet on an IEP or don't have a 504. So that's a good example of what that might look like. So then I have my next slide defining my services. Now, I'm sticking with the theme of the school district because I think, again, it is the most comprehensive. Individuals are pretty easy because you're going to say, hey, I'm going to teach you about this one thing. If you're doing computer, screen reader, and phone instruction, like you may not have all this other stuff. But in the school system, it says instruction, consult, and evaluation based on the expanded core. Why? Well, because the expanded core includes 9 areas of education and domains that we're responsible for. It includes lesson preparation and route scouting, report writing, data collection, analysis, quarterly goal progress monitoring, accessible educational material production and conversion, assistive tech research, acquisition, grant writing and training, consultations through text, email, phone with educational team members, state and district required in-person, virtual, or webinar training. And that's very important. One school district I work for mandates that we go through their mandatory training for all employees. It's 6.5 hours of modules and videos. And this, because it's my service, I can bill them for it. Otherwise, I'm going to spend 6.5 hours watching the videos, taking the quizzes, and not get paid. So remember, you are your business and you are your brand, and you need to make sure to cover these things. The next bullet talks about support for due process or hearing. So if there's a lawsuit or a child complaint, travel necessary to perform the services. So basically what that means is I can bill them while I'm traveling between buildings, or if I work with multiple clients, I can get paid for that. Travel time is different than if I have a separate travel fee. And then finally, if I provide in-service trainings, workshops, other training, bus drivers, a student's family. So you can tell that's a pretty comprehensive list. Well, why? Well, because I want to make sure that I cover everything that I say I'm going to do. And then if they ask me to do something that's not listed here, we need to amend the agreement. Does that kind of make sense? I know a lot of you guys aren't on camera, so I can't really see head shaking, but hopefully that is making sense to you. All right, I got a thumbs up. Kat, thank you. I appreciate it. I see you. All right. And the interpreter also gave me a thumbs up, or I think she was probably signing for a thumbs up. So, all right, a couple hands coming. All right. So let's talk about some additional considerations. Now, my first bullet in here, when I talk about my scope of services, I say that I'm going to do it across their home, all district schools, the community environment, and at the times that the student needs it, which is before school, during the school day, after school, the evening, nighttime, and be consistent with what's on their IEP or their 504. So that addresses homeschool and community as part of the expanded core. It says that I can get the kid before school, during, after, evenings, weekends, whenever, because remember, I'm a full-time teacher at a school district. So my contracts start at 2:30 in the afternoon. And like last night, I had a night lesson that didn't start till 8:15 because that's what time it gets dark. And so I make sure to outline when I can provide the services. It also is important because a school district might need to hire you to work with a person that can only receive services outside of the school hours. If you're working with an adult client, they may need you to be there at night, or maybe they only have weekends only. So make sure that your scope matches the population of folks that you're going to be working for, right? Now, the established background checks, that this is my default. I say that I will do the child abuse and neglect and a criminal records check. I will, and that's through like the FBI. I will do the state highway patrol criminal records check. And then this is where I say I will do all district required training. What that also means is I have some young people, and actually some of the adults that I work with that have some significant behavioral considerations. And I've had to go and get MANT training and many years ago called CPI, where if you have to engage somebody physically, how do you do that in the roundabout right way? So if I need to receive a training in order to work with the student, they have to pay for it and I get to charge for it. Okay. So again, I think it's hard, especially for a lot of folks that are educators, because we're just like, well, you just do the job to get it done, but you gotta put on that contractor hat. So hopefully these are good examples for you. Okay. You also need to say, What are your qualifications and credentials? So you are going to be substantiating that you are what is called the designated service provider. So right now, I am the DSP. However, if one of you guys approaches me and says, "Hey, Kevin, I would really like you to hire me into your business," then I would need to say, okay, who is going to be the provider if I know who it is? If I don't know who it is, I'm not going to designate that provider. I'm going to just say, hey, one of my employees will be providing that service. Now, in Missouri, you cannot sign an agreement with a school district unless you have a certified or licensed person currently available. So the idea is folks were signing contracts, they don't have anybody, then they can't find anybody, and then the kid and the family go without services. So the Bright Act of Missouri did away with that. It's happening less and less, but it's still happening. So the idea is that you know who's going to be that provider. And then also you need to make sure that you have the credentials to do what you're saying that you're going to do. And that is very important. I will give a quick example that there is a state that does not require a certified orientation mobility specialist. They don't require the credential. So if I find somebody who might be retired that never went and got their comms because when ACVRIP was established, they thought, yeah, I only have a few years left. I'm not going to do it. I could technically hire them and send them to that state if they don't require it. But if it's in my home state, it does require a COMS. So it doesn't matter if you have 35 or 40 years of experience, you have to have that credential. So make sure that you keep up with that. Okay, some pearls of wisdom about the scope of service. These are things that I want to share with you. Make sure you always complete the requisite trainings. It's very, very important. You are attesting that you completed it. You are being paid for it. So just let your yes be yes, have integrity, and maintain your code of ethics. I'll
Hey,
leave it at
Kevin,
that. Yes.
this is Desmond. We have a question. Someone was asking
Sure.
which state were you referring to?
The state of Virginia. The state of Virginia, from my understanding. So you could have like a master's in O&M, but it's up to the local school agency, I believe is what they call it, or local school something. So yeah, that's a totally different conversation. But yeah, so I think Virginia was the one. Okay, let's see. Scope of service. All right, second one, include service locations. Make sure to address school closure. So what happens if there was a school closure? And that's not necessarily meaning another pandemic. That is the school closes for a week. Like my school district closed for 4 days a couple of years ago due to a legit cyber attack. Like there was like the FBI was involved and school was canceled and it was closed. So what happened to service provision at that time? Also, there is a difference between extended school year and summer services. So there may be a student that doesn't require extended school year because they're not going to necessarily lose the instruction that they gained, and recoupment is an issue. But it's just so incredibly important that you keep moving them forward that they may call those summer services. So make sure you have a plan. If you are not available to provide ESY or summer services, put that in your agreement, right? So if you just want to work August to May, then you got to make sure to say that your contract does not guarantee extended school year and summer services, and you need to talk about it. I have had a school district go in a different direction because I would not commit to doing it. But part of the reason is I work in a summer program the entire month of June. So if their summer services and ESY were in June, I would have had a conflict and I'd be in breach. So kind of keep that in mind. Consider an exhibit to list the students receiving services. So let me give it to you this way. I will, if I know I'm going there for a student and I know I have the time, I can get there and I've worked out kind of an expected service plan. I will list that student in an exhibit. I will say, for example, NH at this school with this many minutes. The reason for that is if you have a student move into that district, let's say you have a student who is blind and is receiving instruction in Braille and has a lot of ADL needs, and you are the contracting TVI, well, if they're going to say, well, we need you 4 days a week for 120 minutes a day, and you don't have that in your schedule, you're in a bind because your agreement says, I'm going to provide services to your district. If you don't specify that one kid or that one client, the expectation is you're going to provide all of our services. So for me as a private contractor, I have to very, very closely monitor my availability and then realistically take jobs that I know I could fulfill. So I really encourage you to consider having an exhibit of students listed. Now, it also says, hey, if you get a new kid, then let's talk. If I'm able to work it out, great. We will just make an amendment to that exhibit and then we move forward. Okay. So it doesn't change anything in the agreement because the services are still listed, but now I'm agreeing to take on another student. So it's very, very important that you make that consideration. Let's talk about including or excluding practicum and internship students. I I have a firm belief that if we want our profession to grow, we've got to help folks that are in their practicum and internship. It's a lot different for me to say that when I am a full-time employee of a school district and I have the power of, a giant school district behind me if something were to go wrong. So if we're in foods class and my practicum student gets burned along with my student, I know my school district's got our back and the university has their back. However, if I am a private contractor supervising a practicum or internship student, I just need to be aware and I need to make sure that my insurance allows me to do that. I need to make sure that the university has insurance on that student and that I am not personally liable for them. Does that make sense? I know, again, most of you guys are off the screen. Kat, give me another thumbs up. All right, good. Thanks, Kat. I don't know you. Good to meet you. You're the first person I can see on my screen. So make sure you say if you're willing to. Some school districts are trying to do a build your own. And what that means is they may have a paraeducator that they are helping to get through school to then become a TVI. And they say you're going to be their mentor. Well, that that doesn't always bode too well, especially if you're being told to do something. And then again, you may not have the time to do it. And you may also just not feel that you're prepared. But I will say that our field is getting better to help us all understand what it means to be a supervisor and how we can do some really good training. But I would encourage you just to include them, but make sure you protect yourself. And then finally, make sure you designate a financial and maintenance responsibility for equipment and tools. I have had agencies say, we want you to come and work with our adults, but we will not provide any devices. And I'm like, well, I can't go buy a $4,000 refreshable braille display. Like I can't do that. I might be able to borrow one for a couple of weeks to trial or demo to your adult client, but I can't purchase that. So your agreement needs to outline who's responsible for those devices and then who maintains them. I have some school districts that say we will not give you a laptop, but we will give you an email address. And then I kind of counter back saying, well, I'm supposed to teach your student a screen reader and Fusion and this Chromebook stuff, but I don't have that software or I need to go buy it. So from a business expense, if you're buying Fusion, it's a couple $1,000s and then you buy a Chromebook that's a couple $100s and then you buy a PC to put it on and then the client breaks it, that's on you. So you need to make sure you address these things in your agreement. All right. Let me get a quick drink here before we go into rates. Am I doing okay? Is my pacing okay? Okay, got it. Thank you, Cheryl. I got thumbs up from Cheryl too. All right, let's talk about compensation. I am a firm believer in establishing what I call a monthly fee. That monthly fee covers general availability of services that are really tricky to capture. Text messaging, quick phone calls, one sentence emails like parent emails or client emails and says, hey, are we going to see you at 4:30 on Friday? Yes. Now, some people will say, well, that's a billable service like a lawyer. I like a monthly fee because I feel like it's fair. I won't be nickel and diming. And also I don't have the brain power to try to capture every one of those little things in the app that I use every time I'm text messaging and stuff like that. So the monthly fee is just an amount. So the way I look at it is if they have between 0 and 10, 9 or 10 students, I charge them 2 hours. So let's just say my hourly rate's $100. My monthly fee will be $200 every single month. And that means I'm not billing you for anything less than a billable unit. Now, billable units can be 15 minutes, could be 30 minutes. Again, this is what we're going to be talking about next, but I'm a big fan of a monthly fee. Do not call it a retainer because agencies are like, we retain our lawyers, nobody else. So that's why I just call it a monthly fee. And I put a statement just like this explaining what that is. Now let's talk about the service type. So again, service, capital S, that slide that had all the stuff that we do. I'm going to be billing for assessment, instruction, consultation. It doesn't matter if it's daytime hours, after hours, weekend rates, but you have to decide, are you going to charge the same thing across all of those locations, across all of those services? So I'm just going to use, for simple math, $100 an hour. If I am teaching, evaluating, assessing, writing reports, I could just charge $100 an hour for everything I do. But then I might say, but when it is after school hours or in the evenings or on the weekends, maybe instead of charging $100, I jump it up to $125 or maybe $150. Okay. And that might be because, hey, my time is precious. I don't have a lot of it. And it's a lot for me to drive an hour to get to this client. So again, you have to decide how you want to structure it. You might have a different rate. I'm not going to give you my opinion on that. I'm just throwing it out there that you will see that in different agreements. You also have to stipulate a cancellation fee. Now, I've got a slide on that that I will talk about, but you need to have a plan for when things happen. As a private contractor, if you drive an hour to get to a client and they decide not to come to the day program that day, and then you have to drive an hour home because you don't have any other clients after them, you just spent 2 hours in the car and got paid nothing, right? The schools, the agency, the day program's not out anything because that adult just didn't show up. You know, they get paid either way. But as a private contractor, your time is precious. So you need to consider, are you going to charge your flat rate for travel or do you have a different travel fee? And so when it comes to services rendered, you have some choices. That is the hourly rate. So every hour that you are providing a service, you are going to bill them, and then you need to decide how you're going to do that. Is it every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour? Portal to portal, that is another name for door to door. What that means is I'm going to start the clock when I leave my home office, and I will stop the clock when I get back home. So basically, it's covering all of the travel for you to get to the service site, the services rendered, and then your travel time back home. So in the example of $100 an hour, I drive 30 minutes to get to a client. I'm in their home with them for an hour and 15 minutes, and then I have a 30-minute drive home. I would be billing them for 2.25 hours. Everybody with me? Then you could consider a flat fee. And a flat fee would be I get hired by an agency to do an evaluation for technology. And I just know that I typically spend a half hour doing a records review. I spend about an hour preparing materials and the evaluation itself. I'm going to spend about 90 minutes evaluating them. I need 2 hours to write a report, and the meeting to go over the report is an hour. I'm going to give them a flat fee and say, I will do your evaluation for $1,600 or whatever it might be. That is what is considered a flat fee. You're not going to be submitting dates and times and all the services. You're just like, here it is. You may also have a daily fee or a half rate fee. That is very common if you get into travel. So if I'm going to leave Missouri and go to California to work with a school district 3 days a week, I may just say, I'm going to give you a daily fee. That includes my travel, my rental, my hotel, all those kind of rates. That's where you might get into daily fees. You may also do that for training and mentorship, different opportunities you might have. If you're doing an all-day training somewhere, you may have a daily rate. They may say, hey, we'll pay for all of your expenses, but what is your daily rate? You need to have that ready. And then you may also just bundle services, meaning I'm going to give you 5 hours of mobility, 2 hours of cooking and home maintenance. I'm going to give you 2 hours of technology, and then I'm going to do another hour of family training, and I'm going to bundle it. So those are the general categories of the types and the services rendered. Okay, so that all goes into your agreement. You need to stipulate what you're going to do. So this is an example. I just basically gave it to you about an hourly rate with drive time. So let's say your hourly rate is $150 an hour, and then you have a $60 an hour drive time. So in the prior example, my 30-minute drive time my 30-minute drive time at $60 an hour. 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. I'm going to bill them $60 for that. And then I'm going to bill them 1.25 at $150 an hour. So I've reduced the travel time. Now, some agencies and school districts will say, we don't pay our employees to drive to work. We will not pay you. I understand that, but I am a hot commodity and I am not making a wise business decision to drive 45 minutes away from my home to provide 1 hour of work for $100 an hour or 150 or 200 or whatever you're charging. That 3 hours of time ends up really reducing your income. And keep in mind, as a business owner, that is your gross pay, right? This is just like the money you're bringing in. But every time you get paid, you have to think you've got the charges for your car, your liability insurance, your auto insurance, your workman's compensation, all of those other fees have to get figured into your hourly rate. Okay. And then portal to portal, that one's really easy. Start the clock, stop the clock. Now, I will tell you that I don't do mileage reimbursement. I currently have a car, but it's not owned. The car is owned by me. So I track the mileage and then I take the mileage reimbursement rate from the government towards my taxes. Some school districts love that because it's one less thing they have to pay out. So you might be able to kind of discuss that with them. Do you want a drive time and mileage? Do you want mileage only? And some will say, we don't do either. And then you have to make a business decision. Am I willing to do 3 hours of work for $150? So that comes out to $50 an hour. And when you take out your self-employment tax, all of your insurance and stuff, you're making $32 an hour. So keep those things in mind. All right, compensation rate development. These are the things you need to consider. Your years of experience, what are your credentials? You need to consider your geographic market. Look at what related professionals are making. So for example, the OT and SLPs, they actually publish some compensation rates and surveys that are available. I'm a big fan of going to school districts and looking at the agreements that they currently have because that's public information, right? So if I want to know what they're contracting behavior analysts for or a physical therapist, most districts in my area, those are contractual services. So I can find out how much a music therapist is making. And if that music therapist is charging $150 an hour, I know I'm as needed as that person is. So I may try to get in that 150 range or maybe more because I'm just as needed and maybe more so. I'm not a big fan of bleeding school districts dry. I want to be paid fairly for who I am and what I do. There are some folks that charge $250 an hour portal to portal. Now, keep in mind that might be because they're driving 2 hours to get there. So before you jump to conclusions, make sure you understand where they're coming from and the type of contract that they have. Again, consider your true cost of business, look for other funding sources, and then also what is the demand? You know, if you are in an area that has a whole bunch of CADI, I guess that's the plural of CADIS. If you got a bunch of CADI around, it's going to be pretty competitive. You may not be able to get a higher level of pay if you want to secure the work. So by doing a little bit of research and a little bit of market research, also, if you get onto places like salary.com, you look at what other companies are trying to hire independent contractors for, that'll give you a pretty good sense. Now, I will comment that there are a lot of healthcare companies trying to hire TVIs and O&Ms for the school systems. And what I've come to find out is I call them, they'll say, hey, we'll pay you $35 an hour to go and be our virtual TVI. And I'm thinking, a virtual TVI, well, that's a different discussion anyway, but I could easily in my area charge $100 or $120 an hour, but you're only going to give me 30. Like that's great business for you, and that's capitalism at its best. But you need to be aware of what other people are being paid, and that's super easy too because most not-for-profits, school districts, they have to publish the compensation rates. So if you do a little math and be like, okay, teachers work 185 days in the school year, you can figure out what their per day rate is and then divide it by 7.5 hours per day and you'll see that they're making $43 an hour. But you also have to concern they're getting health insurance, retirement, all those kinds of things. So I'm just trying to tell you, make sure that your rate reflects all of these things. You may see some familiar names on this slide about a survey for O&M contracting that was finalized in 2023. Our field been working on this for a long time. And basically, it's a really good article. It is hyperlinked here. And it shows some highs and lows and what is the average pay across government agencies, nonprofit organizations, for profits, and schools. So in this example, you'll see that Arizona, the mean dollars per hour is $209, where Florida was 55. So you got to be careful reading into some of these things because some areas might have somebody traveling a couple of hours to get there to provide this service. So their hourly unit rate is very, very high because it has to capture everything. And then other folks are local and they're retired and they just want to keep their foot in the door and they're just charging $55 an hour. So take this with a grain of salt, but Rob and Susan and Joanne, those guys, they did a great job with this survey. It's really, really good. It's very intriguing. So I encourage you to go and look at it. But I just pulled this one stat out for you guys. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on because oh my gosh, we're running out of time big time. All right, compensation. Make sure you talk about what does your travel time look like. If you travel there and then a kid is absent or a meeting is canceled, you need to have a plan for how you're going to charge for that. So, for example, I drove 45 minutes to a school the other day. I walk in to get my student, and the whole building was going to an assembly and nobody told me about it. So then I had to turn around and drive home. Well, I went on site. So I'm charging them for the 45-minute drive, a 1 hour service fee because I have a 1 hour minimum, and then the 45-minute drive home. Some of you guys might be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money for doing nothing. True. But what that meant was I could not go get another client. I lost the ability to make money because they didn't call me to tell me that kid canceled. I may have been able to pivot and go see one of my adult clients. So had I been there and not gotten paid, I would have just lost almost 3 hours of my time and come away with nothing. And if that happens one day a week over the course of a month, you're going to be out multiple thousands of dollars. So kind of keep that in mind. One other thing I want to point out is what we call equally apportionate travel time. So if I go to work with, I go to a day program for some adults, and then I go over to a school district. My agreement says that I will not double dip. I am not going to charge the agency my drive time to and from my home office and then travel and then charge the school district the drive time to and from my office. I will split that time. So if I go from the day program to the school, I split the time. And to me, that's the way to go. Other people don't do it that way. But you just need to kind of keep that in mind what that looks like. The other piece is like I drive 90 minutes away to go work with a kid. Well, when I finish his lesson, I can't realistically charge the next school district 90 minutes of drive time to go and get their student when it's normally a 30-minute drive. So these are things that do need to be outlined in your agreement. Some pearls of wisdom: abide by your code of ethics. Your hourly rate is not your take-home pay. Keep that in mind. It's super important. Establish your rate at or above other professionals. Establish what is a billable unit. So if I go work in the state schools for the severely handicapped here in Missouri, you can only bill when you are in person working with a student, and it's a 30-minute billable unit. So you got a lot of math to do. Okay. Also, make sure you have a cancellation policy because if you don't have one, then you just are making a suggestion of what to do. Make sure you give yourself a raise yearly or at least every other year. So a cost of living raise of 2 to 3% is very common. If you go multiple years without giving yourself a raise, you're losing money because your insurance and your gas and everything are going up. Okay, termination. Termination for cause means there is a reason that the agreement needs to be ended. That could be because of confidentiality break, misrepresentation of your credentials. You may have termination for non-payment, meaning they didn't pay you for the work that you did, and you're like, I'm out of here. But you need to have a provision that says, even if I terminate, you still owe me the money that we agreed on. Termination without cause. Basically, that's like they say, we don't need you anymore. And I will tell you that this happened because a younger professional came in, and I say this with love, but they underbid me. They came in and said, "Well, I know, you're giving him $150 an hour. I'll do it for 125." And they say, "Okay," and then the district wants out of that agreement. Well, my contract, this is the example from my agreement. It says early termination fee equals 50% of the average monthly fees paid to Hollinger Consulting during August to May. So what that means is if we are mid-year and you drop this contract, you're going to owe me 50% of what I've average of what you've already paid me for the remaining months on the contract. So it's an incentive for somebody not to drop you because they're going to have to pay you out the rest of the school year. I will tell you, if you have a student who is a high minute learner, maybe a student who's blind with Braille instruction, and you're spending, 8 hours a week with them and they move out, that's a big hit. And if they end your contract and they say, well, we have no more students, and they end your contract, that's a big hit. And you can't necessarily go find that kind of job in the middle of a school year, or the adult agencies might be full, or the state contract. So have a plan for that. Lastly, you need a statement about inability to perform. So basically, what that means is if something happens to me, I'm disabled, I'm hurt, I resign, I retire for good, what is the plan for that? So I typically say I'm going to have an employee. I will have 30 days to try to find a replacement. And if I can't, then the agreement is terminated without penalty for them or me. So, again, some things are out of your hand, but you need that in your agreement, because otherwise they could say, hey, I'm pulling a name, Ellie, you have a contract with us. I'm sorry you got hurt in the car accident, but you have to find us a service provider, and you have a contract. And by law, they're right. You would have to do it. So make sure you include that. Okay, Caitlin, I see your question. We'll get to it, though, I promise. All right, liability, indemnification, and insurance. Liability means who's responsible. Okay, two types. General liability covers bodily injury, property damage. The example is a student trips and falls during an O&M lesson. Professional liability is more about what a lot of people call like malpractice, something that you did that created a situation of harm, a situation of injury. So, for example, if you did not identify a safety concern during an evaluation of a route, right? Your feet are in the street, you're planning, and you didn't find a hazard and somebody gets hurt, and it was neglectful, that is what professional liability is for. And the word indemnification basically means like who's going to cover what. Okay. So sometimes an agency, like maybe a not-for-profit, will say, you cover your own lawyer expenses, we'll cover our own, and that's how we're going to do it. And then there's other times that says, we will cover nothing and you will cover our lawyer expenses. So if you screw up, you're going to have to cover our lawyer fees. So that's a very important part of your agreement that has to be in there. The next couple slides are actual examples of when is a contractor liable and why, and when would the district be liable and why. So I just kind of gave a couple of examples, one of which is like a simple FERPA violation. It has nothing to do with your instruction or your evaluation. But let's say you disclose information you're not supposed to, and you get caught doing it, or you misuse that information. You would be liable for that. And depending on your type of business, if you're a sole proprietor, you are personally liable. If you are a single member LLC or an S Corp, then your business is liable. Okay. District liability or entity meaning agency, state agency, something like that. The example talks about what happens if somebody's injured during a session. So if I'm on the school grounds and there's a truncated dome that is not affixed to the concrete, or the snowblower just knocked it off, and then I step on it, it slides out from me, and I get hurt. That is neglect on the district's or the, whoever owns that business. That is when they would be liable. So those are a couple of examples. Workman's compensation. I'm moving ahead because I want to make sure we get to questions. Insurance, workman's comp. Make sure you have insurance. Workman's comp is dictated by the state. Some states say you do not have to have it if you have less than four employees or five employees. Some agencies, non-for-profits, individuals will not let you work for them unless you carry it. So make sure that you are aware of the rules in your state. Automobile insurance, check with your carrier. Most personal auto policies explicitly exclude business use. Do not try to pull one over on your auto insurance. I can't say that enough. Be very transparent on what you do. Now, they may say, oh, explain to me what you do. And you need to choose your words carefully, because if you say blind and child in my car, the the underwriters for that agency may not like to hear that. So I often say, I'm kind of like a realtor. I put people in my car to go places and do things. They need to understand that you are not ride sharing, that somebody is not paying you for a ride somewhere, because ride sharing is a different class of insurance. You may need to increase your liability limits. So you have to find out what are the minimums for a business policy. You may want to consider adding an umbrella policy. So again, if something happens, then you are well protected for yourself and for anybody that might be in your car. Track every mile you drive. You have to have a really good system, and you have to be very consistent with it. The IRS can come in and audit you. If you own the vehicle, if your business owns the vehicle, you have to drive it more than 80% of the time. So yeah, you can stop off at the grocery store on your way home, but you shouldn't be taking your car on road trips if it's a business car for pleasure. And then also have a private transportation agreement. Woo, we're humming. All right. Pearls of wisdom, make sure that you explain who you are and what you do. Make sure that your credentials work for out of state. So, for example, I'm a big proponent of national board certification for teachers of the visually impaired, because if you get that credential, you can pretty much teach anywhere. They will pretty much automatically give you a license if you're going out of your state. So make sure those things are covered. Okay, exhibit. I mentioned this about student roster, and we're almost done. Student roster, list their name. Make sure you know how you can identify them. What are the services being provided? And then what is your plan if a new client comes in? Whether, again, if I'm in an adult daycare facility and they have a new blind client come in and they want me there 4 hours a week and I can't do it, my contract says I can say no. So that means they might have to go find another provider to come in, but at least that client will get the services that they need. Okay, last slide, resources and reminders. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's called LLC and S Corporations and Tax Deduction for Beginners. That is an excellent book. It helped me so much. Have a plan for tracking your hours, whether that's a Google form, Excel. There are a couple apps that are listed there. I personally use Hours Tracker. I know multiple private contractors that use it. It's a great app. It's very easy to get your end of the month. Like today's the end of the month. So I just click a couple buttons and now I have an Excel spreadsheet for my invoice. Make sure you have a plan for an invoice. Paper pencil isn't going to cut it nowadays, but there are some good online stuff. I wrote your significant other. Might get some help with your billing that way. Make sure you have a business and a website, business cards on a website. You can see I'm wearing an embroidered shirt. When you go into places, make sure you're identifiable. Apparel goes a long way. It's advertising. It promotes professionalism. Get a car magnet for your car, especially if you're a mobility specialist. Have your business buy it, slap it on the outside of the car. So when you park in a neighborhood, people aren't calling the police on you or getting your car towed. That has happened before. So yeah, or stick a little piece of paper on the inside of your car and say who you are. All right. So We got about 20 minutes for questions. I have a little statement here that says, if you ask me something that's very specific, legally, tax, or financial, I'm going to take a pass on that. Number one, I probably don't know your state's requirements. And two, I'd just rather talk in broader terms about, contracts and things like that. So, who has a question?
Kevin, I see one question in the chat that says that we cover liability cap in the indemnification slide.
Yes. Okay. So with the liability cap, let me get back there real quick. Um, what that means is when you write your agreement, the district might say, we will only pay you up to what you earn from us if there is a complaint or a lawsuit filed against you. So they will try to put a cap on how liable they are for you. And so that's really important to note because if I only made $4,000 from that school district and they're going to say that's all that we will pay for you with legal fees, or in my example that I slipped on a truncated dome and I got hurt, that means I wouldn't be able to take action against them for more than $4,000. So just be aware a lot of school districts and agencies and nonprofits will put a cap on the liability. Thank you for reminding me.
Kevin, I think that Caitlin might have had one.
Okay. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat, and does that ever backfire if you end a contract so they ever try to charge you? If you end a contract so they ever try to charge you? Caitlin, I'm
Sorry,
not sure.
I'll just
Go ahead.
come off. I'll just come off mute because I was voice texting. Like when you were saying that you have them pay you half of the contract or 50% of what's left of the contract. Like, have you ever had an issue where they're like, okay, well, then if you end the contract for whatever reason, then you owe us back X amount of money.
So good, excellent question. My agreement addresses that, saying no. So when you talk about that, there are different levels of liability. When I just went back to the slide that says termination for cause, meaning there is a reason, then termination without cause. The without cause is what you need to be careful of. Without cause just means they walk in and say, you're fired. We don't need you anymore. And so, as a private contractor, again, I put this into agreements that are big contracts for me. If I'm going out of state and I'm planning, airfare and, hotel rooms and things like that, if you lose that contract, that's a huge hit for you to take financially, and you may not be able to recover for it. So, it's basically a deterrent of them just letting you go for no reason. But if it's in your agreement, then and they signed it and you signed it, then you implement that contract. Okay, I see a question from Rebecca. Can you talk about Medicaid and if they would compensate your fee? Okay, so good question. So Medicaid is a little bit tricky. I work for the Missouri Department of Mental Health as a private contractor. There are currently 4 adults in the entire state of Missouri with a developmental disability that are getting services from me. That's it, 4 people only. They gave me a code with a maximum rate that I can get. It is nowhere near my private contractual rate. One thing I didn't say, and I'm sorry I didn't say it, is you have to be very careful about altering your rates amongst a lot of your customers because people will look at that. If the state of Missouri will only pay me $88 and they only pay everybody doing the service $88, I have a business decision to make. So I may not feel good about that. Let's say I'm charging $150 per hour for an agency or a school district, but then the state only gives me 88. I may take it because I need the work, but that might be really hard to charge these other people, almost twice the amount. So yes, you can get paid through Medicaid, but they're paying your business. Medicaid's not paying you directly because we don't get third-party reimbursement. Now, if you are an OT or a PT and you set up billable for insurance. That's any I just use OTPT as an example. But our vision impairment specialists, we do not receive third-party reimbursement. So we would not get a direct payment from Medicaid. I hope that answers your question, Rebecca.
I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I've got my EIN, but it's what is it? It's my own business. How do I turn it into a sole proprietorship, an LLC?
So, to my knowledge, I'm smiling. Uh, when you got that EIN, you had to tell them the name of your business at that time. You
Yes.
can restructure your business through your articles of organization and through your um, operating agreement. So that is a question for your accountant if you're going to make a change. So, for example, I think Catherine, I think that's your name. Catherine, I started as just a single member LLC. And once I started making enough money, my accountant came to me and said, "Hey, listen, we need to move you up because there's a lot more tax advantages for you to take care of." So it didn't change what my business was doing. I just started filing as an S corporation. So that's a question for your accountant.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. Do you take TRICARE insurance or any other insurance?
Yeah, Carolyn, good question. I do not because I am not, I don't have third party reimbursement. So I can't accept insurance in my company based on what I do. Insurance won't pay for TVI, they won't pay for O&M. Assistive technology, they might. Now, I'm also finishing my ADA coordinator certificate right now. And that is something that if I want to structure my business differently to accept insurance, I could probably do that. But again, that's a big jump. That's a really big jump. And for me personally, I don't want to make that jump because there's not a lot of business that I think I would get from it. So again, it just depends on how you set up your business. And that is where going from an S corporation to a C corporation would be a discussion with your accountant to figure out, because the C corporation is a whole another ball game. So
There
okay.
was a resource given in the chat, and then Carolyn also said, did you have trouble finding a company to provide your LLC insurance? I heard there are very limited companies that will provide insurance for private COMS.
Yeah, Carolyn, great question. So over the years, I've bounced between Forrest T. Jones, which is an AER member benefit. So if you are a member of AER BVI, you can purchase insurance, private practice, and you can get the professional liability through them. You can also get what's called an off-premise rider, which means when you are, that is if you would damage somebody else's business during the course of your business, right? So if I'm walking along with a long cane and I'm tapping, shorelining a building and I break a window, that off-premise rider would cover it. So Forrest T. Jones is one, if you are an AER member. The other one is HPSO. HPSO is another company that provides a lot of people insurance. Now, Forrest T. Jones, many years ago, they would not cover any of my work done as an adjunct professor, teaching trainings like conferences and things like that, or doing expert witnessing. So I left Forrest T. Jones because they didn't cover it at the time. And then I just went and found an insurance broker and just said, "Hey, this is my job. This is my profession. Go find me insurance." And he found me a great rate. I mean, I got a great rate. So it's worth contacting somebody to help you find that insurance. But the fallback is Forrest T. Jones. Yeah, the spelling, yeah, Forrest T. Jones, correct. It's ftj.com. And on their website, you go down and I can't remember, it says, "What is your professional association?" Then you would say AERBVI. And then you would be able to go through and get a quote. And then you basically just give them a bunch of paperwork. It's not hard. I mean, you can do it in no time at all. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Other questions?
So
I got
while we're
Cardinals.
having a little pause, Kevin, I'm going to do a little housekeeping if that's okay.
Sure. Yep.
All right. So our closing code today is going to be SKY. So, yep. And it's in so if you are an OMSA member, if you're a member of OMSA, you can get continuing education credit for this webinar. And so you will be sent an evaluation form in the next few days. And in that, Kevin, is that where you would like for me to include your PowerPoint?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yep.
I'll include Kevin's PowerPoint in that follow-up email, so you'll have that. The recording of this webinar will be available within about 30 days, on our website on LiveBinders. Um, if if you are not a member of OMSA, it's very easy to become a member on the email that you will receive for attending. If you registered for this webinar, you will be getting a link to join OMSA. So,
I saw another question. Yes, join OMSA for sure. There was a question from Regina that says, "Can I talk about being an expert witness?" Yes. So this is the importance again of your website, of your LinkedIn's, your Facebook and stuff. If you put that into your operating agreement and you list it in your website and you market yourself as an expert witness, you will be contacted. You may get a call from a lawyer and say, "Hey, I'd like to have 10 minutes of your time," because that's all they give you, and they tell you and say, "Hey, this is kind of the situation. What side of the situation would you be on?" Basically plaintiff or defendant. And then if you guys are aligned, then they would say, "Well, can would you be interested in doing this?" So there is a lot to expert witnessing. I've done a number of court cases. It's very taxing and can be very hard and can last a very long time. And let's see, 6 cases, 7 cases I've been for, I've never actually gone into court because they all settle outside. And half the time they talk to you and get your opinion. They disclose you as an expert and then it settles out of court. So there's not a ton of opportunities, but if you feel like you have the knowledge base and the gumption to do it, you can definitely do it. It's not something, it's kind of hard to advertise. It's one of those things you just kind of put it on your website and people come looking. And then there may be word of mouth, but most people that are expert witnesses, they're going to take that job before it trickles down. So there's a statement. Oh, hi, Bonnie. It's so good to see your name. I miss you. Bonnie makes a comment about transporting kids in a personal vehicle, and school districts might provide transportation for you. Absolutely. You can write that into agreement and say a district car, usually the driver's ed car, because kids aren't doing driver's ed during the school day in a lot of cases. You may say, "I need access to a district vehicle." I've actually contracted with districts where I say I won't transport privately because of some behaviors and things of the student exhibited. And so we utilized what was called EMT, which is Express Medical Transport. It's basically a cab. We've also used Uber and Lyft in some cases. So yeah, there are definitely ways around that. Or use public transit, to Bonnie's point. But where I live and work, we don't have public transit. Like I do a lot of rural, like gravel road, watch out for the deer, and turkey sign kind of stuff. So if you're in that area, you can get around it that way.
Yeah,
Um,
this is Judy. I have my own business too. Just a side thing for mileage. A couple of suggestions. I use Google Maps for my mileage. So from portal to portal, it shows the route that I take and how many miles I'm going, how long it takes me to get there, and I put that into my notes and then ultimately into my yeah, my whatever,
what?
my bill, whatever you want to call it. And then another one is there is an app, it's called Mile IQ. There is a cost for it. It's something like $60 a year or something, but something like that might be beneficial. And I guess it'll chart your private mileage or business mileage, and you can select which one that is that you did, and then you can get a report from that, and you can put that in your taxes or in your reports or um, whatever.
Yep.
Just
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. Mile IQ is one that is very popular. And again, it's $60. And if you have a business, the business pays that $60. So, again, it comes off of the top as a business expense. So when you go to pay your taxes, it's not earned income. So again, that's like, I mean, somebody mentioned in the chat, like every slide could be its own webinar. Yeah, every topic probably could be. That's why it was like, okay, we got 90 minutes, go. Um, but a couple, any other questions, please throw them in there. Here's the big takeaway, guys. Just be wise. Make sure you're thorough. Make sure that you cover yourself because, it is important. It's exhilarating fun to have a lot more autonomy and to go into far-reaching places. I had to get over the fact that somebody was going to pay me to drive 90 minutes to go work with a kid, but that kid hadn't had a service provider for 3 years since COVID. And so I just thought, man, that's a lot of money, but you know what? My time's worth it, And if I wasn't driving 90 minutes to get there, I'd be trying to find an adult client or somebody here locally to work with. And again, my push for this was because I wanted to keep my wife home with my kids and homeschool. So I had to go find extra work. And it's something I've been doing now since 2005. Work a couple days a week after school and a couple weekends and evenings here and there. It's great for us to do. Just be wise about it. Make sure to maintain your code of ethics. Like, just because you're solo doesn't mean that somebody can't report you. And if you're credentialed with like ACVREP, you're still going to be, judged by a panel of your peers. So keep that in mind. Even if you make business decisions, your code of ethics extends to that, and it's very important. So, anything else? I know we're almost at time. On the last slide, I quit sharing, but on the last slide is my contact information, and you guys will see that. So feel free to shoot me an email. Hopefully, I'll see some of you guys at the AAR conference this summer. I know a good friend of ours, John Kelly, used to do a presentation like this many, many years ago. He came to AAR over and over and did these things. So it might be something that we could look to do every couple of years or something. So just find a friend, find somebody that owns their business. Most people are willing to share as long as you're not their competition. So,
Thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing
all right.
all this really great knowledge. And it's all very interesting. I feel like I have a minor in CPA. I'm going to, with your permission, I'll put your contact information in with our email that's going to go out on Monday. Okay. So I'll
Sounds good.
pull that information there. And I'll put it in the email. Everybody who is registered will get the email. So again, please fill that out and we will issue the professional development certificates to people who are members. Right. Have a
Awesome.
wonderful evening, everyone. And thank you again, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out to be here.